Good evening, everyone, and welcome. My name's Professor Ross Young. I'm Deputy Vice-Chancellor, Research and Innovation here at the University of the Sunshine Coast. I'd like to begin tonight by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we gather, the Gubbi Gubbi people, and I pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. Tonight marks the second event of our flagship Building Better series, an exciting new platform to ignite conversations and offer solutions to some of the most pressing issues of our time. As a university, we're proud of the impact of our research in tackling global challenges in health, the environment, and sustainability, helping to shape healthier people and a healthier planet. Our koala chlamydia vaccine and our new Milby Centre for Sea Turtle Research and Rehabilitation are two wonderful examples. Thank you for joining us as we celebrate this impact and, importantly, the power of combining this research with community action and collaboration. I'm so pleased to welcome back once again tonight's moderator, Dr Norman Swan. Dr Swan is one of Australia's most respected journalists, broadcasters and commentators. Thank you to Dr Swan and our three panellists for sharing their expertise and insights with us. Everyone, please welcome Dr Norman Swan.
Hi, welcome to you all. Thank you for coming. Sorry so few of you could make it, but you know it's nice to see those of you who could. This is I'm used to doing health stuff, but this is intimately related. It's about the health of the planet. It's about the health of our local environment. It's about the health of our oceans. And we are nourished by the natural world around us. And if that shrinks, our nourishment is less, and it has an impact on us all, and we all care about it. Just witness how many people are here to hear the conversation tonight. Important research is being done here at the university, but also we're going to hear about ordinary people working to save wildlife and doing that in the most responsible way that they can, that's as informed as possible by science. So I'd like you to please welcome our panelists. Professor Peter Timms, who is the Deputy Director of the Centre for Bioinnovation and Professor of Microbiology. He's coming up as we speak. Professor Kathy Townsend, who's Associate Dean Research here at the USC and Professor of Animal Ecology. And Josh Neille, who's a wildlife carer not from Queensland. So is he the real reason you're all here? It's not Peter, Kathy and I, it's the lad from Victoria. Well, I better start with you then, Josh, otherwise they'll be disappointed. Josh has hurt his back, so he's here under duress, and we appreciate that immensely. Wrangling too many wombats.
I feel like a run-over wombat at the moment. Still getting used to this from the bush, you know.
The mic should be on.
There we go.
You're good. Great. Just give me the dimensions of the project that you're now involved with compared to where you started.
I guess I just started as anyone else here in these seats would be. I'm a Sparky by trade. I never had a university degree, and to sit up here and be surrounded by academically smart people very much humbles me as the hillbilly from the bush. But how it all started was just doing small things to help animals. I guess when you grow up in a farm occupation or space, you have a lot of interactions with the animals that still occupy that land, and I was there to break that stigma that farmers don't care about animals, like we're some of the most compassionate people. So seeing that with all the little critters come in, you might be down the paddock and a kangaroo caught in the fence and stuff like that. At a young age, my mother she'd reared animals as a kid as part of her curriculum just for her school, and then she instilled that compassion in me, and having those little interactions when I was a kid, hands-on things, made me be more empathetic, and it took a long time to grow into that space, coming from a farming background, and you know, you're only a product of your predecessors and what you're taught in there. And it took me a while, especially having ADD, to form my own opinions and get my own perceptions on animals and how I could best help them. And I didn't do it to impress anyone else. I never did this to become this person that you guys obviously support. I just did it because I enjoyed doing it, and I was just lucky enough that social media come along and I got a little window to my unique lifestyle and my character, I guess, and that's how it all grew into this in the last couple of years. And I'm very appreciated that if it wasn't for people out you supporting that and investing their time and energy into what I'm doing, I would still be sitting at home doing the same things I'm probably doing now, but not getting these opportunities to resonate with people and hopefully inspire your kids to grow up and be someone like I am, just an everyday person trying to help critters.
How many critters are you helping?
Wow, if you count the free-range guinea pigs I got at the moment, that gets the count up. I reckon that's what I should be renowned for. I think I'm the biggest free-range guinea pig farmer in the Southern Hemisphere. So, but at the moment we've got 4 little kangaroos. I've got 7 wombats. I had 8 the other day, but one dug out and went on its own adventure. So hopefully she's doing all right. And I've got a turtle, so right up your alley, and a couple of tawny frog mouths and a few other little critters. But a lot of my stuff is one day you can put 2 animals back in the bush and the next day 3 more knocking on your door. So I've probably got about 50 in care at the moment, all up.
And you're getting into eagles, you were telling me.
Yeah, so I'm starting to do a lot of birds of prey. They seem to be one of those animals that when people in the public, this might sound bad, but I'm one for not sugarcoating things. If, say, a magpie or a koala gets hit, people seem to just go, oh, it's only a magpie or a koala, and deal with it. But they seem to invest a lot of energy when it's a bird of prey, something that's unique that you don't see much, like an owl. They go to a lot more effort to be like, whoa, look at this cool bird and let's help preserve it. So I'm seeing a lot of birds of prey come in, and they definitely come with their challenges because a lot of these animals, as I said, I'm just a sparky by trade. I don't have any of this background, and they need specialised care. And with that, like a big eagle, you might get hit by a car and have a sore wing. I can contain it, and you know that wing can heal, but then I need to find a space as big as this sort of space we're in now to then rehab it, because most people that have done themselves any injuries in their life might know if you break your leg at the skate park or playing footy, you can put yourself in a moon boot and your leg heals. That's the easy part of your journey. The hardest part then is when you take that off, because you haven't been running around, all your muscles degrade, and you've got to pretty much then do all that rehab and physio. And for me, when I'm out in my paddock and people are driving past and I throw a bird up to see if it's all right and it flies 100 metres and then drops onto the ground, I spend half my day running around trying to catch it again. So to build a pen like this, especially with the sore back, a kidney would outrun me at the moment. So to be able to have these networks and do things like this, I found there's a lot of great people in the community that are willing to help you.
Where did you learn what you had to do?
I don't care what anyone says. It's like parenting your kid. It's trial and error. I bet you most of you people who have got kids out there, you've done things the first time with them and said, well, I best be not letting that pseudo cream sit on the shelf there again, or something like that. So I've been pretty much trial and error people, using my network to the best of my abilities to reach out and ask people, you know, how do I do this? But where I live in the rural area, you don't have experts. I don't have like a university like this with all these amazing people in, and that's where I've tried to use social media to my benefit and drag these people in. And Kathy's going to hate me now because anything with the turtle, so I'm going to have to be ringing her up. So you got yourself into this, yeah.
There was a detailed conversation about how to repair a shell in the room as we were preparing for this. But your philosophy is this is about getting animals back into the wild.
Yeah, so in Victoria, it's hard to understand this sometimes because a lot of people that love wildlife, or you wouldn't be in this space. For me, I have to get an animal to a position where it can be rehabilitated so it will make it in the wild without your intervention. So
does that mean you've got to triage the animals?
Yeah. So, and that's hard for me because you don't know, like we spoke about before, everyone's seen a seagull with one leg, right? So you know that if a seagull come in and it was missing a leg, that'd probably be right to put your time and effort into and rehab that, and you could let it go knowing you'd probably survive with one leg or just swim around in circles. But if that was like an owl and it's missing a couple of toes, that's going to be detrimental to it no matter how much it might want to try and develop a system where it could survive. it generally won't. And to have to then put all that time and effort in and then put an animal down when you can't have the option to sort of give it to a zoo or a rehab facility is pretty hard. But that's one of the things I've found has been super hard for me. Coming from a Sparky background, how do I learn off these people what animals and what injuries can affect one species and be able to be released where another species have the same injury and wouldn't make it?
So in a sense, you've got to conserve your resources, but also be not ruthless, but you've got to edit what you do in order to achieve for the animals who are going to succeed.
Yeah, 100%. The hardest part too is I found out that in wildlife rehabilitation, time is your biggest asset. You can get all the money you want, you can get all the facilities you want, but you're only one person, and you got to make those hard decisions. It's like this animal that came in all busted up, I could probably, utilise my time and get it back, but it's going to take so much time and effort when I could probably in that same time rescue 3 others that I know will make it. And that's been a pretty challenging space for me is because you don't have the resources, there's not enough wildlife carers out there to shed that load, is you really have to make hard decisions. And that's been pretty hard for me when you, I don't know about you guys, but like if you got your little puppy and you brought it home and you kept it in your family for 2 years like we do these wombats, and then one day I turn around to you and say, tomorrow you're going to have to go and dump that puppy in the bush and you'll never see it again. That's pretty hard. And even for Amber and my little daughter, being from a farming background, I understand it, and I'm used to it now. My sister's a paramedic, and I always try and put it in this perspective. If you're a paramedic and you go to a job and someone's lost a finger, the first time you're on that job, you're probably like, that's a finger. And then by your time you're a 10-year veteran, you're like, can someone grab that finger and put it in the icebox next to me sandwiches? So I think it's just all time and experience and making these decisions. And then you have to make hard decisions too. Like, who likes to put down any animal, let alone a cute little wallaby that's come in that you've reared up for a few weeks and then you know it's got an injury, it won't make it, and I have to go out the back and, well, I'm not going to sugarcoat it, you have to shoot it, or, you can't get to a vet to give it the green dream. A lot of those things you can't take in. It's more stress on the animal, plus you can get injured. They give you nasty kicks, some little buggers.
So some people might say, it's fantastic what you do, and it's we'll come to the social media aspects in a minute. Did you start off just doing this for the sake of the animals themselves, or do you see this within a bigger context? Because some people might say, well, saving 50 animals a year is fantastic, but it's not changing the world. Or is it changing the world?
What I've learned to understand in this space, especially with social media, is if you're one person, like for me, I'll personally maybe save 1,000 animals in my life. So that's good, and I'll feel good about that. But if you can influence a lot of people, doing a little is the same as a small amount of people doing a lot. And what I understand now is to try and educate the people that you don't have to have a farm like I do and spend hundreds of thousands of dollars and build all this stuff up. Just as a person in the community, if you can get those kids interested in like going out and spotting wombats with mange, or it might just be like getting out of the car and checking a wombat for a joey and dragging them off the road, which stops other animals coming or stops other, hazards happening. You don't have to do much, but if we can get heaps of people doing just little things, it's like if you walk along the beach with everyone here. If one person was picking up rubbish, it's a lot of effort. If everyone just picked up one piece, you'd still have triple the amount of, rubbish at the end of the day. It's like trying to get people involved and understand that you don't have to be like, I'm a perfect example of it, I guess. You guys come in here, support me, support these people. I don't have a scientific degree. I don't have a university or academic training. I'm just an every Aussie battler that likes hanging out with my family, helping out animals. So that's been a big thing for me, is understanding the power of influence and how that there's so many good people out here that want to help you. They just have to know that you exist to help you.
And social media was just a natural extension of what you were doing, or was it a deliberate strategy?
No, so I'm going to strap yourselves in, ladies and gentlemen. So what I did is when social media, because no one grew up in my era to become an influencer, right? It didn't exist. I remember, back in the day, if you got a naughty photo off a girl, it was like, is that a knee or a bum, or what is that? Like, these connections didn't exist. And I started a Snapchat, was a platform I started on. And I was actually a stripper for a couple of years. So I was And I worked in industry, so you've got to understand.
You hadn't told me that.
Yeah. When you're in, that's why this is easy for me. I don't even have to take my clothes off. It's great. But what you don't understand is
when some people here who wouldn't mind actually.
You just come for the. But that's how it started. People were watching my Snapchats, and because I grew up in industry, it was F that and look at this and this, and because that's just how it is when you're in industry. And they said, oh, Josh, we love watching your stuff with the kids, except for I have to watch it first and like swearing, nudity, oh, cute animals. And then, so that's how it actually really begun, is I could start to see that people really enjoyed my everyday life and were so intrigued, especially with the animals. And then all of a sudden they said I should start a TikTok account. So I started TikTok and I got banned in 2 weeks. And I was thinking, I didn't even put any nude photos on here. Like, why are they banning me? And it's because I was having my daughter with snakes, but they don't tell you that. So for me, my perception of a python, especially one that I've got, and it's my family pet, I know that animal, much like you would probably all have family dogs, and you're quite comfortable to have your kid sitting next to something like a staffy, which if you looked at that in my eyes, if that animal turned on your kid, I'd rather try and pull a python off a 6-year-old than a staffy. But that's been a big thing for me to understand that this is how society looks at certain things, like stigma of snakes and that type of stuff.
But they're also risk averse.
Risk for reward. And then that's what happened. I got banned off the TikTok and couldn't figure out why. And then Instagram built a little Reels window, which allowed you to put 30-second clips up. And as soon as I started doing that, it just went crazy. Because people obviously, I forget that I take it for granted that most kids in the city might only see a pigeon and a cat for the whole month. And I'm thinking, why are so many people interested on what I'm doing out here? And that's when I really started to figure out the power of when I'm places and little kids come up to me and they're talking to you like they live in your house. They're like, how's Rocco the wombat? And geez, Ashley's been up to mischief with that little cockatoo you've got in. And it's because that's what humbles me for this opportunity as much as anything, not just helping the wildlife. There's not many things people these days can do with their kids. As a dad that works a lot, you sacrifice a lot. And to know that they're coming home every night and sitting on their dad's knee and then they go, let's watch the Wombat Guy. And to know they're getting that connection with their parents in this day and age when everyone has to work their butt off with costs of living and all that, that's as special to me with that relationship because I had that with my parents as saving the animals themselves.
Is regulation and risk averseness getting in the way of volunteering for wildlife caring?
Massive. So what I couldn't understand is why is there this big gap? Like, I'm 38, so I'm getting old in the tooth. And I keep thinking to myself...
Okay, we'll just change the mind about that. Fine.
But I keep thinking to myself, why aren't I seeing young people doing this stuff? Like, why isn't there more Josh Neilles out there and you don't see of it? And I think that's because cost of living, to buy a property now, like I own 35 acres, which isn't a big land mass, but you need a certain amount of space to do what I'm doing. Then you have to go out and build infrastructure to comply with what we're just about to talk about, regulations. And that can cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars. And being a tradie, and my dad owns an earth moving business, so quite often be like, have you seen my excavator? And I'm like, oh, I think I've got it at my house. What about that pile of rock I was supposed to use for a job? I'm like, might be in the wombat pen. So these sort of things have really helped me. And the regulation, though, is something that makes it really hard because what I like to talk about is thinking, why is there a big gap between older people seem to be very compassionate towards wildlife?
Why are you pointing to us?
That was a general thing. I look like the invalid at the moment. I'm wobbling around. I can't even get up. But I keep thinking that, like, why all these... I know you get greener as you get older. Anyone that's getting to my age, I'm, like, doing stuff that I used to do, and it gets hard, especially with... I think you just get more empathetic, maybe, or soft, one of those two. But what I've seen is, like... Before 1975 is when they brought in the Wildlife Act, and I'm not sure if that Wildlife Act is national, but 1975 they brought in a Wildlife Act in Victoria, and what that did is it protected the animals, right? Which is awesome. What it did, though, is it fenced the everyday person out of having those interactions with wildlife where they could grow these positive interactions, which when you get that, you become involved, invested, and with that comes empathy and compassion. So I kept thinking, like, my mum... Everyone that's like, it's born that's sort of 50 years old now has a story. Like my grandma, we had wombats when we were a kid, or there was a wallaby we helped and we reared it. And that's how they got all these stories. And when you have and spend that time with these little animals, you really invest in like their little journey, and you think, oh, they're not what I thought. Like all I knew about wombats before this was like, shoot that bugger before he gets down the hole. That's all we knew, because that's how I grew up. And then form my own opinions on that was through these interactions I had. So what that Wildlife Act did is there's a big gap between people that are sort of born in the 80s to the 2000s, where because they never got these experiences at their grandma's house or out on rural areas to interact and have hands-on experiences, because the regulations stop that, once you have these interactions, you want to help out. You really see them in a different light. And I think that's been a big thing for me. I had no one's videos to watch of the cute little wombat running around, jumping in my dishwasher, causing me heaps of trouble. So you didn't become invested in their story. So when I went out and did those things when I was a kid, I didn't do anything I seen was cruel, but I did stuff that I look back at now and go, why did I do that? So like we'd go out and shoot the wombats for the farmers, which I still understand they can do damage, and you can see why they need to cull them in certain areas. But I was the kid when I was driving up a national park, one would run across the road and I'd run it over and go, yes, got another one for the farmers. You think I don't look back at that now and go, what? Why did I do that? And it's because I had none of this. I had none of these forums. All you are is a product of your predecessors, and until you can, I've figured it out. You brainwash the kids, the farmers' kids, and then they'll be like to their dad, like, maybe we won't shoot as many kangaroos and we'll put some fence up this year and it'll get better and better. And I've figured out that these are the things that are really important, and I think kids and the regulations have stopped that, but what I'm trying to do is use this as a tool to be like, to sucker them into having this empathy and compassion. And I think that's been a massive thing, that the regulation's been really good to protect wildlife from big industry, but it stopped the general public having much control on doing and contributing to the space, because they're fenced out. If you get caught, by God, if you get caught like bottle feeding a wombat without a licence, you nearly go to jail these days. But you can go and rob someone at knife point in Melbourne with a machete and they're like, oh, you're all right, you'll get better next week. So pretty hard to palate that sort of stuff, and that's what I'm here to advocate for as well, is in trying to involve the farmers and these landowners. You've got to understand that these people, they're the ones that are going to make a difference. They own the land. So we can advocate as much as you want if you don't control the space, but if we can get conservation and farmers to have a good relationship, for mange management's a good example. You can invite them onto, the farmers will invite them on and go, yeah, go and treat the wombats up the back. But at the moment they're so scared because there's such a divide. They're like, I'll let you on to treat the wombats, and you'll whinge about how I'm keeping me calves out the back. So I'm trying to like bridge that gap and make people understand that these people are pretty compassionate people. They wouldn't be shooting kangaroos if they didn't have to. They don't wake up in the morning and be like, can't wait to kill some shit, eh? They're good people as well. Yeah.
So Peter and Kathy, I mean, you rely on volunteers as well. Does this ring bells for you, Peter?
Yeah. That's on, yeah?
Yep.
So, first of all, I need to say that I didn't know Josh before tonight. I looked at some of his TikToks and I thought, this guy's going to be a pretty interesting discussion. But we've had, I think, so many things in common, so many things, even for hard science and so on, let alone the projects that I'm involved in. So many commonalities and ways to work through things. So it's really great to be with you here, Josh. I haven't got as much energy as you've got. I have no idea how.
Probably move faster at the moment.
And it's not to do with the fact that Norman is older. But getting back to the volunteers and the koalas in particular, which is one of the areas we work in. Clearly, a lot of people are out there. Koalas are getting injured on the roads, disease and so on, and people have to help out by picking them up and bringing them into wildlife hospitals or doing whatever they can to get them done. And those people are incredibly passionate. Some of you know, these people would drive their own vehicles 2 hours just to bring them up to the Australia Zoo. And that's before petrol was this crappy price it is now. And sometimes I'd get vouchers and sometimes I wouldn't. They'd just do it for nothing at all. But even those people now are supposed to have beep, beep, beep regulations for the vehicle they transport those in. So these things are catching up with us, aren't they? But there's technology coming. There are some nice apps these days where you can go out and, click on when you see a koala or enter it in when you've saved it or so on. So there's a bit of science coming together with practicality. So yeah.
How truly endangered are koalas?
Yeah, it's always a really good question. It's worthwhile saying that there are certain patches or areas where there are koalas and they're doing okay, but that would be in the 5%. There are, 80 or 90% of the areas, koalas are reducing. There's less koalas today than there was yesterday. That's a simple fact. Some areas it's more of a problem, and some areas less of a problem. And the main one is still habitat destruction. It's clear that habitat is the main thing. We used to, there's a saying that if no tree, no me. If you don't have a habitat or something to eat, nothing else really matters. So
they're highly evolved. They're very particular eaters.
Absolutely. I don't know whether you know, these days there's 400 or perhaps 900 species of eucalyptus leaves, and those koalas can tell every single one apart. And even if that same tree grew on this side of the hill or grew on this side of the hill, you would think it's the same, but it's not. There's different nutrients. There might be a creek over here, and so there's water availability, and so the koalas have worked out that everything, all those nutrients in those leaves matter a lot. So they've evolved.
So will they move between trees? They'll get some nutrients from one, and they'll move off three trees down, three eucalypts down to pick up the nutrients that they're missing from this one, or?
That's a probably more sophisticated question than I have an answer for, but they certainly do know which leaves they like eating, and Josh would know if he's done any with the koala work. You need to put the right leaves, and they'll eat the young shoots and what they won't do.
Yeah, they're definitely fussy, I know that.
And so sometimes people try to map habitat, right, and tree coverage areas and work out where they are. And this also goes to a really highly contentious issue about picking koalas up and moving them from one area to the other. There's certain words for that. The word translocation is a dirty word. But the idea that you could pick them up and say, oh, there's 6 trees here and they're the same as those 6 trees there, they should be all right. And that's clearly not the case. There's much more detailed requirements than that. Sure, there's a politician with the camera crew out there and he watches the koala go back up a tree and she says, she's all right, mate. But in a year's time, half of those koalas are not doing well. So it's a complicated thing for sure. But science is, doing some nutrition on those leaves and trying to understand the gut microbiome. The thing that you go sometimes to your doctor and he gives you some lactobacillus tablets or probiotics or something. Well, koalas need probiotics as well.
And it's one reason why, coming to chlamydia, you can't give them antibiotics, which is what you would do with a human. Yeah,
that's right. So we have a antibiotic that treats chlamydia, and I'll get back to you afterwards for that patient you had that needs a bit of treatment. That's okay. He's a doctor anyway. He can prescribe it himself, right?
I would never do that.
But koalas have done 2 things. They eat eucalyptus all the time, and eucalyptus are full of toxins. They're not very tasty. I don't know how many of you have eaten a eucalyptus leaf. It's not very nice. It's full of toxins. And so what koalas have done over thousands and thousands and thousands of years, they've adapted their livers to make lots of enzymes to break all the toxins down. Makes sense, right? If you didn't do that, you probably wouldn't survive. But the problem is when we give them antibiotics, they break those down as well. So when you might, for a human, you might give the antibiotic once. For koalas, you have to give it every single day for at least 14 days. So what you're doing is superloading them on antibiotics. And you know that that's not good for humans. It's certainly no good for koalas because they've got a gut full of specialised bacteria. So koalas don't digest the leaves. The bacteria in their gut digest the leaves. So if you hit them with all those antibiotics, you're going to seriously destroy and damage their gut bacteria. So antibiotics, as good as the wildlife hospitals are doing that treatment, and they are, but it's highly intense and highly labour intensive, and it's not a solution.
So I'm just getting a sense here, coming to chlamydia. Are we talking about an endemic disease, and if you were to get 1,000 koalas from the environment, what percentage would have chlamydia, or is it just an organism that makes them sick? And because that goes to how you control it. We'll come to your vaccine in a moment. So give me a sense of what you'd call the epidemiology of chlamydia in koalas.
Yeah, so chlamydia continues to be a very common infection and disease. And there's some studies being done that suggest that more than half of any koalas that get infected end up with getting disease. So there's a difference, right? And COVID's become a really good example of that. In the flu, you can get infected, but you don't always get the disease. And so there's a lot more chlamydia in the northern part of Queensland and northern New South Wales. That's where a lot of the koalas are, of course. And the number of about 50% is a pretty good average figure. A lot of populations have 50% infection levels. Some don't, some are lower, but some are higher. There was one not that long ago down in New South Wales that had 80% infection level, and that's clearly quite destructive. Chlamydia hardly ever kills koalas outright. What it does is, of course, its main problem is it's a sexually transmitted infection, so it results in reproductive tract infections, particularly in females, but also in males, and that results in infertility. Maybe not initially, but it's a chronic infection over time. So that's how it causes the most.
So has it always been there, or is it recent? Is it caused by environmental stress? What's the story?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I wish I had a better answer to you. There was one sort of hypothesis some time ago that some of the chlamydia that are in sheep and cattle are very similar to the chlamydia that are in koalas. And it was a logical thing to think that perhaps the sheep and cattle had passed that chlamydia across. As we do more and more fancy genetics and so on, it looks like the koalas have got their own strains of chlamydia. They're not necessarily having jumped across, which is a little bit different. What we do see, I think, and by we I mean the general we, not necessarily me at all, is that we see that any sorts of stress, so again, habitat destruction, climate change, having to cross roads all the time, all these things add a layer of stress, nevertheless, that results in what might have been lower grade infections that they could cope with, eventually becoming higher grade infections. So I think we're seeing that in some areas, not others. We do see lots of differences, and that's sort of puzzling us at the moment, both with understanding it, but also if you ever want to think about vaccination and how you would best use it.
So they catch it sexually. So it's transmitted sexually, the same way as chlamydia is transmitted in humans.
Yeah, primarily sexually. A little bit of mother to young transmission as well, because koalas are coprophagic. We love talking about things. They eat their own shit.
Yeah, I was using big words and I couldn't understand, so you got that for me. I was lucky. Made me look silly.
That's right.
So it's the bacteria in their gut. And so what the mother does is she's able to regurgitate it up into a watery stuff and spit it out and give it to their babies, because they need to do it. They can give them chlamydia at the same time, but that's a bit of a trap. But it's mainly sexually transmitted.
I mean, there's different kinds of chlamydia. It can cause eye infection like trachoma, or they can cause pneumonia. Do koalas get those different versions, or it's just the sexually transmitted one?
Another good question. In humans, the strains that infect the eyes versus the urogenital tract seem to be different strains. In koalas, using all the methods we've tried at the moment at least, we don't see vastly different strains that we could call the eye strain or the urogenital tract strain. It looks like we think there's at least 20 different strains out there circulating around, but they're not necessarily fixed on causing different diseases.
So why? I mean, so you can imagine the intellectual challenge in creating and the technological challenge in creating a vaccine. But as a means of control, it's not as if mummy koalas bring baby koalas to the GP, 3 times a year for their vaccine. So before you started, you must have had an idea in your head how you would, which is almost the point you're at now, but you must have had an idea of how the heck would you distribute this vaccine to make a difference to the population?
Sure. I mean, just first of all, it's worthwhile mentioning that we're on a journey for this vaccine, right? And we're only part of the way through this journey. I know we had a big achievement last year. We got the vaccine approved by the regulator, but we're still early in this journey. There's many more trials to do yet and improvements. And sometimes I'd ask people, the first flu vaccine, how good do you think that was? Well, this is the first koala chlamydia vaccine, so it needs to get improving, and that's what we do. We're doing, hopefully, good research to keep doing it. My strategies have been in 3 parts. Some people hate the fact that every question I answer is in 3 parts, but that's academic hang-ups, right? The first part is there's an easy way to hand out or utilise, shall we say, and it doesn't matter whether it's our vaccine or some of the other vaccines that have been developed, and that is in all the wildlife hospitals. Lots of koalas, thousands of them, come into wildlife hospitals every year. And clearly, we probably put them there for that reason. They tried to cross roads, or they tried to, they had not enough habitat, or they've got disease. And so it's logical in those wildlife hospitals, you could vaccinate thousands of koalas that need help pretty easily. The second group is we're also building roads everywhere. Did you realise that? And I'm a strong supporter of the government, and they do the best they can to reduce the impact of those roads. But at the same time, we, and I imagine some of the people here, want roads, better roads, be able to drive to the Gold Coast quicker and so on, and we build a duplication. But that destroys habitat all the time. So therefore, there's a lot of projects like that, perhaps more than you all know about. And those koalas are being managed and being captured and being followed and try to be looked after all that time. So there's another group of animals, again, that we've caused the stress for. We do that. In the middle, we're struggling with how you might use a vaccine more. But at this end, let me give you an example of where you need to think. And it's a bit like Josh again. We'll work with anybody. Anybody that knows something that we don't know, we're happy to work with them, right? Absolutely. And so you could argue that while the vets at the moment would potentially use a syringe and needle to give the vaccination, there's no reason you couldn't do an aerosol vaccination. And you would have seen recently some of the flu vaccines and so on have been given as an aerosol spray. There's actually science that says that should work better. It's not necessarily because a little kid wants it that way. There's a little bit of that as well. We actually think koalas don't really like it, actually. Their nose is pretty sensitive. But nevertheless, it's not beyond the realms over here of having drones. Drones can fly around pretty good these days, and they can heat sense. And with a bit of AI, they can tell you if it's a possum, not a wombat, they won't be up there.
Tree wombats.
A tree wombat. You've got some sayings I cannot get out of my head, Josh. But nevertheless, it's you could imagine that there's a possibility here that in the future you could do something as clever as that. So things are moving pretty fast in lots of areas.
So what are the challenges in developing this, have been the challenges in developing this vaccine? Because you've got to work out, presumably, what part of the chlamydia you're going to work on, just give us a sense of that.
Yeah, sure. Again, it's useful to highlight the fact that we've been doing lots of research, and it's been, we've been getting results, and it's hard to make a vaccine 100% effective. And I think most of you know vaccines are not 100% effective, and the same is true here. We're always trying to improve it. People will sometimes jump on us and say, "Wait a minute, it's not 100% effective." And I go, "Yeah, well, it's not, but we're trying to make it towards."
But this is different because with the flu, you're just trying to prevent people going into hospital or dying, not necessarily spreading the flu. But you actually want to get rid of you want to prevent the infection totally, virtually.
Yeah. So the way we think, and maybe this is a bit of a science geeky thinking, but there's three sorts of animals: the animals that are not yet infected, could they get the vaccine, or a vaccine, I should say, so that they wouldn't get chlamydia? I actually think that's impossible. You can't do that with the flu and COVID. So why would you think you could do it with koalas? There are animals that have already got infected, but you don't want them to go on and get disease, or you want them to get less disease. And so that's a pretty important group of animals if you could develop your vaccine so that it really targeted that. And that goes to the fact that if you could make that work in females so that they were able to have baby koalas longer, that would be a pretty overall. Now, we care about the individual koala, but we actually care about the population even more.
But you want male koalas to be protected too, because they're passing it to the females.
Absolutely, and the group at QUT is doing some nice work on male koalas, and certainly that would be the case. And the third group is animals that have already got disease, and we did one particular study because I wouldn't have thought that you could have given a vaccine to a diseased animal and had a real big effect, because you can't again with COVID, right? You don't take the vaccine when you've got COVID or the flu. But we did see some promising results there. So I think it's possible to have vaccines. Now, we've been working on what you might call a vaccine. I think what we're going to find out that you need slightly different versions of that vaccine to cover all the different things.
So where are you at now? You got approval last year. You're in a manufacturing process. Just give us a sense of where you're at in the journey.
Yeah, sure. Last year, we filled all that rotten paperwork in. I bet you we've got more paperwork than you, Josh.
Yeah, probably.
100%.
That's what you get for being smart. I can always say, I'm just a tradie. I don't know how to do that.
And so we did all that, and we submitted all that based on our research version of the vaccines. to the APVMA, they're the regulatory body, not much different to the FDA that approves your drugs that you guys have. Believe it or not, veterinary vaccines are pretty highly regulated, and they approve that as what's called a minor use permit. So it's not a registration, but it's nevertheless a limited time permit that allows us to make the vaccine and eventually use it. But we're not there yet. So we've been spending our time, we've got a Australian vaccine manufacturer, and I made a decision early on not to go with a multinational, international vaccine manufacturer. I still think it was the right decision. Wasn't meant to generate that, because there are times I sit in my office and think I made the wrong decision there. But I think it was the right thing to do. And they make boutique vaccines, because we're talking about a boutique vaccine, right? Well, I was talking to our international partners a while ago. They said, we're running a batch of flu vaccine. We'll make 40 million doses. How many doses do you need? I said, how about 1,000? So these are the issues. Yeah. But anyway, they're going through a process now in a very highly controlled facility to make a batch of this, what will be now the approved vaccine. It might sound like it's the same, but it's not. It's the real stuff.
So have you learned anything in the process that applies to other vaccines?
Yeah, I think we have, and we've sort of suggested that. Other vaccines that relate to wildlife, I have an interest in human vaccines, and there's a lot going on in the human vaccine space, and certainly some of the things we do. The other thing that we're sort of known for is we don't do trials in rats and mice, little nice controlled trials. We do trials in real koalas. What you get there is the real answer, but it's a messy answer, and it's sometimes really hard to see how good your vaccine really was, because you've got so much complexity, but it's in the real world. And so I think the reason the human chlamydia people like us communicating is we can do things they can't do. So we can, in the real, you're testing out things, will the strains change? What are you going to see over time, and so on. So I think, while not perfect, I think it's on a good path. I used to think the end of the tunnel was not that far away, and I used to joke sometimes with my wife, perhaps, that I didn't want to be the person that she said, you worked for so long, and they're going to put on your tombstone that you worked really hard and you didn't quite make it. But that tunnel keeps getting longer and longer, and there's more to do. And I'm fully supportive of the fact that we now need to do, even with that version of that vaccine, we now need to do even more trials, carefully controlled, all those sorts of things that sometimes we get criticism for. People like criticising, Josh. Yeah. Do they what? And so we're at that stage, and we're just trying to work our way through it. But do I think there'll be a vaccine for koala chlamydia? Yes, I do. Does it need to keep getting improved? Yes, it does. Is it better to have something that's safe and has some value than nothing at all? I think the answer to that's yes. Different people have different opinions there.
Kathy, you also rely on volunteers a lot. Tell us about the Milby Project.
Yeah, so the Milby Project is just recently opened, which is very exciting. The Milby Center is up in Harvey Bay, and it all came about because back at the 21-22 floods, 99% of the seagrass in Harvey Bay died. And so that meant that all the sea turtles and dugongs and other animals that relied upon it were then starving, having to go to alternative food sources, sometimes things as unpalatable as mangrove leaves. And of course, what meant that we suddenly had this huge number of sea turtles that were stranding in the region. And we have this amazing volunteer group that's called Turtles in Trouble Rescue. And they were...
Just before we go on, a turtle stranding is a sign of illness.
Yes. So sea turtles should not come up onto the shore unless it's a female laying her eggs. But otherwise, if there's a turtle washed up on shore, it's sick. They spend all their time in the ocean. And so stranding is where you've got an unwell turtle. Sometimes they're injured or sometimes they're unwell, and they'll wash up because obviously if they're really weak, they can actually drown because they still breathe air. So we had a huge number of these animals showing up, going from an average of 12 strandings a year to now over 130. And these were all animals that required critical care, and they were being driven from Harvey Bay down to Australia Zoo Wildlife Hospital. It was all done by volunteers, all done under their own, paying for their own petrol and all of these things. And then at the other side of that coin is Australia Zoo Wildlife Hospital, SeaWorld, and Sea Life were becoming inundated with the sea turtles that we had that were coming down from our region. And that meant that they were having to make really hard choices about which ones that they could actually do some to help, or they'd have to end up euthanizing. And so I study sea turtles, I work on sea turtles and human impacts on the marine environment, but then I was also talking to our volunteers as well as the traditional owners up there, so the Bachelor people. And all three of us all three groups were like, we're really concerned about what's going on here. What can we do about this? Like, what can we do to try to fix this? And that's where the idea of the Milby Centre came about. And it was greatly supported by Australia Zoo Wildlife Hospital, because they're like, great, then we can get some of the load that we're having to deal, off to us. But of course, really important particularly for the Bachelor people, to keep the animals on country.
So you did this with local First Nations people?
Yes, yeah. And but then the other side of this coin is not just the rehabilitation, which of course is really important, but for me, I think the really important thing about the Milby Centre is that we also are trying to figure out why. Why are the animals showing up sick? And so that means not just looking at the diseases, but also looking at the environment itself. So we know that, so one of the projects we're looking at right now is back to that change in diet over that time period. When they've had to change their diet, what has that done with the nutritional content that they're able to get access to? So that's one of the big projects, is looking at what's available to these animals during these types of events, and what does that mean as far as their nutrients and hence their overall health is concerned. We're also concerned about things like gut microbiome as well, because when sea turtles are coming in for care, for example, they get fed a very high protein diet, which is usually fish and squid. But then when they're released back out again, they're having to feed back on seagrass. And so their gut microbiome has been completely changed. And we're starting to do some work on what does that mean? And is there ways that when these animals are fully rehabilitated and sent back out into the environment, can we actually set them up better so that they can digest it?
Offering them a pescatarian diet, if you like, rather than a cellulose-based diet?
Because it's protein, and protein gets them to heal faster. So it's taking and converting that protein into an ability to be able to basically fatten up, and they will accept it. Like, it's not like they'll go, no, I don't want it. They actively
prawns,
will feed it. No, prawns, I don't want it. It's disgusting. No, they'll actually eat it. But we do they currently supplement the diet with things like butter lettuce and things like that as well. But that's not seagrass. That's, again, different.
So what percentage do you get back into the wild?
I wish I could tell you it was a really high percentage. Unfortunately, again, like Josh would know, when you're doing this wild care work, a lot of these animals do not survive, because wild animals will not show that they're unwell until they can't not show it.
So they're already far gone.
They're very far gone. So I would say probably around 20% of the sea turtles it depends. So if it's just having issues because they've been starving and they need to be fattened up again, that's a much higher success rate. Whereas if you've got animals that have diseases or have things like gut impaction caused by ingesting marine plastic or something, it depends how far gone that animal is as to whether or not they'll be able to survive.
So you talk about turtles being the canary in the coal mine, a barometer of environmental change. Talk to us about plastics.
Yeah, so that's where a lot of my research has come from. So I actually started my journey with sea turtles looking at the impact of plastics on sea turtles. Again, I was a carer too back in the day, and this was when I was working on North Stradbroke Island, and I was getting sea turtles brought into the marine research station that I worked at. And these animals were coming in looking pretty much fine from the outside, but really skinny. But then I started to talk to other carers, and there was this discussion around ingesting plastics. And so this is where my science brain kicked in. And I went, well, is this really a problem? Or is it just because it's so unusual that the carers are thinking that it is really a problem? And so I had a bit of a look. And at the time, the only information we really had was from the Queensland Stranding database. And about 2% of the animals were being listed of having died from marine debris ingestion, which on a population level is probably sustainable. However, it just didn't seem right. And the
You were
reason
seeing much more of it.
it seemed like it was much more. But the only way you can really tell this is by actually opening up the animal. So once you've got a dead animal, you have to open it up and do the very, very unpleasant job. And I think this is why I was the only person that was doing this at the time, was basically pull out the guts, squeeze out all the contents, sieve it, and see what you can find. And we very quickly went from 2% of sea turtles having died from plastics in the region to closer to 35% in a very, very short time period.
Because you were looking for it.
Because I was looking for it. Because not to say anything bad about the database, but the database was based upon rangers going out, and if they saw an animal, if it's got a boat strike, it's pretty obviously that's how that animal died. But anything that was internal, it wasn't really being looked at. So that was why there was such a disparity, because they were just...
So is this microplastic or big chunks?
So this was starting off with a macroplastic. So this is bigger pieces. But saying that, we had a hatchling that was about 8 centimeters, so only probably about a month old. And it was a piece of plastic smaller than my baby fingernail that had perforated the gut and had killed that animal. So it doesn't matter sometimes the size of the plastics, but it really does cause different things. So you can get gut impaction, which is where it basically causes necrosis of the gut stops allowing food to move through it, but then mixed in with the plastics is organic matter. That organic matter breaks down, decomposes, creates gases, and then the animal floats to the surface. So it means it can't duck dive down to feed, it can't get out of the way of boats. So that's, and it's really painful. It's literally like the worst kind of constipation you can imagine. And reptiles have an ability to survive a very long time without food. So they would be basically suffering for months before they finally would wash up. So that's one way. The other way is obviously just perforation. So actually poking through a gut and then gut contents spilling into the body cavity. And then another way that animals can interact with marine debris is entanglement in it as well. So a range of different ways that they can get involved with it.
And what about chemicals?
Yes. So now we're to chemicals. We've done a lot of work on this.
Talk about runoff and barrier reef and all that sort of thing.
Yeah. So we've done a lot of work on ecotoxicology, which is the term for that, which is looking at how the chemicals in the environment are impacting the animals that are being exposed to it. And we've definitely found that the sea turtles in our area are being impacted, like things, heavy metals such as selenium. We've also got animals that are being exposed to a range of chemicals which we think might actually be exacerbated by these microplastics that you've been talking about. Because microplastics, which can act like little sponges, so they can suck up a lot of these toxins, which sounds fantastic, except if something eats it. Because then it means that it's almost like a little pill. It's like a way that toxin can actually be exposed to that animal. So it offloads the toxins that it has, and that animal then gets
What does it
exposed
do to the animal?
Well, it depends upon what it is. So it depends upon the chemical. So it can do everything from interfere with reproduction. I don't know why I pointed at you then. Sorry about that.
Few chemicals I've had every day, I think.
So it can interfere with reproduction. Of course, it can
I'll
cause...
see you out the back.
Lucky my back's knackered. I'll sort you out.
But a range, so it's a range of chemicals. So everything from creating sort of tumor-like processes, interfering with the liver function, gut function, all these sorts of things.
And water temperature? Because now we're getting to...
Yeah, so...
We're talking about environmental change, but we're now talking about climate change.
Yeah, so again, sea turtles are the poster child or children of human impacts on the marine environment. And of course, pollution is one thing, boat strikes another, but then finally it's coming back to climate change. And the impact that climate change is having on sea turtles and a lot of marine animals is multifold. So sometimes it's just directly. So for the sea turtles, most of you probably know that a sea turtle, when the egg is first laid, we don't know if it's a boy or a girl yet. So its sex hasn't been determined until a certain stage in its development, and it really fully depends on the temperature of that sand at that time period. So if it's above 28 degrees Celsius, it's going to be a female. If it's below 26 degrees Celsius, it's going to be a male. In between that range, you're going to get a mix of 50-50. Now, so girls are hot, boys are cool. That's how you remember it. Now, with climate change, what's happening is that the sands that these animals are in are now starting to heat up. And we're getting examples of this, particularly at Rain Island, which is one of the largest turtle rookeries in Australia. And for the last few seasons, they've shown an increase of feminization, which means that almost all, if not all, of the clutch of turtle hatchlings that are coming out are females. Which I'm all for girl power, but you still need the boys, right? Like, we still need to have males in the population to be able to move the population forward. And as the sand temperatures increase over time, this is going to become a bigger and bigger problem.
So not only do you get lower reproductive rates, you get a lower gene pool, presumably, fertilizing the females.
That's correct. And the other thing, back to the pollution as well, there's been a recent study that's been done that's shown the double whammy of having been exposed to pollutants plus temperature will actually increase the probability of feminization. So the temperatures don't have to be as high for the animals for the hatchlings to show feminization.
We're running out of time, but I can't not ask you about Project Manta.
Yes. So Project Manta is my other passion. I've been very fortunate to,
before you go on.
Yes.
What is a manta ray?
Okay. Does everyone know what a manta ray is? Possibly not. So manta
It's not so much that, it's such a peculiar animal.
Yes. So manta rays are the largest rays it's actually the largest fish that we get in the Great Barrier Reef. They can get from, the ones that we have can get up to 5 meters from wingtip to wingtip. They're triangular in shape. So 5 meters, this is 1, 2, it's actually probably the width between where we're all sitting. So it's quite a decent sized animal. My mother's very pleased that they don't have teeth. They don't, there's not really anything that can harm you from them.
The tail couldn't.
No, they don't have a stinging barb either. So which is one of the things about manta rays, that they don't have a stinging barb. They feed on plankton. And the reason I got into this project was, again, I was invited to come and give a talk about them, and I thought, I'll go and have a look at the literature. This was back in 2006-07. I'll just have a look at the literature and see what's out there. And to my horror, there was 5 papers. 2 of them were about taxonomy, and the other 3 was because they happened to see manta rays when they were surveying for other things. And that's when Project Manta came about.
So we knew nothing, effectively.
We effectively knew nothing. And then we found out we knew even less, because 2 years later, we discovered that what we thought was the species of manta we had in Australia was actually a completely newly identified species. So it was Manta alfredi that we had here in Australia. So we really had to start from ground zero. And it was very exciting to start this project, because I felt a little bit like Darwin, because we knew so little about this animal and about these species that literally everything we discovered was new and exciting. And I've been very fortunate to work with
Lady
amazing
Elliot Island
people.
is a very special part of this story.
Yes, so Lady Elliot Island is, for those of you who have visited there, is the center of the manta universe on the east coast of Australia. We currently have over 1,600 individuals identified from that location, and we can identify individuals using spot and dot patterns on their bellies. And so we've made some amazing discoveries by tapping into citizen scientists who provide us these photographs. We've got the oldest known manta ray. His name is Taurus, who lives at Lady Elliot, who's well and truly over 50 years old and still courting the females. We've got I know, good on him, eh? We've got these, we've got 2 young males who are the world record holders of distance. So normally this species goes around 350 kilometers. These 2 young bucks went all the way from northern New South Wales all the way up to Cairns for 1,500 kilometers, so world record holders. And then probably our most special manta ray is Inspector Clouseau. And Inspector Clouseau is bright pink. So on his back, actually, that is literally the color he is. You are wearing Inspector Clouseau gear today. I'm going to have to get a shirt made like that, I think. So Inspector Clouseau, on where he should be white on his belly, he is literally that color pink. He's bright, bright fluorescent.
Is he hanging around the Sydney area a bit more? Been in the harbour.
No. He loves the girls. He's always in the mating trains. We think what's happened with Inspector Clouseau, that there's been a mutation of his melanin cells. So he's showing pink instead of showing white. If it is a genetic mutation, we do know that he's out there courting with all the females. I'm finger crossing that one day we might see some little baby pink ones.
And how sensitive are mantas to the environmental change?
Again, manta rays are another canary in the cage. Probably even more so because manta rays are feeding on plankton. And plankton is one of those things that are very much impacted by changes in current, changes in temperature, changes in the amount of nutrients that's available. And we're already starting to see with the manta rays changes in their migration. So they do a seasonal migration from north to south, and we're starting to see delays in that. So they're showing up, they're leaving later and showing up sooner type thing that's happening with the animals. And so again, we're starting to see some of these impacts of climate change on these animals already. Again, as I said, them and the turtles are our canaries in the cages, and we just need to be looking more closely. Well, I think we are looking closely. We just need to take these warnings more seriously.
So my final question for you all is, how frustrated do you get with politicians about the lack of change in terms of climate change, which is affecting all the animals you're looking after? Josh?
Well, I'm an eternal optimist, which I think I kind of have to be in this job, because if you're not, you'll end up curled in the fetal position under your desk. But we have the capability to make these changes. We have the technology to be converting away from petrochemical fueled sources. We have that technology there. It just means that both the politicians and us as a society might have to be uncomfortable for a little while, because there's going to be a transition, right? And we have to be willing to save the planet. That's not just for the animals that we're on, but we've only got one. This is it. And if we are not taking care of it, not only are we not taking care of the animals, we're also not taking care of ourselves as well.
Josh?
Yeah, I'm sort of stuck in my own bubble a lot out on the hobby farm. The closest I get to politics is one of my guinea pigs has the same hairdo as Donald Trump. And but I don't know, what I find the hardest part for what's happening here in Australia, for me, is like in America does it well. Like everyone that's into conservation, like you pay a fishing license or you want to go deer hunting, and all that money goes back into that space. That's the hardest part for me, is looking at our local government. There's a big mange problem. They used to fund, like it must be whatever money they have left for, like, oh, help the animals. They've pulled funding on like mange management projects and stuff like this. And it's that you think, well, you can't even get the roads fixed around here. Like, show some real initiative here. Because of that thing, I think they listen to the squeaky wheel, and if enough of us make noise about this stuff, that's what they'll fix. But that's been the hardest part for me, is watching all the money that these people that enjoy the outdoors and pay boat license, fishing licenses and all this, it doesn't go into that industry. They run out of money and just shuffle it straight into like doing whatever they need that money for. So I'd like to see a bit of change in that space. So everyone, that when you're given money, like that's why people give me money. I appreciate that. I say, why are you giving me hard-earned money? Like, you're doing the same work as me. I still work full-time. And it's because they enjoy seeing their money every week. I'm like, okay, I'm building a thing today for the Wombat. And you can see where your money's going, and it gives you a feeling of ownership and that you're making a difference. So that's my biggest qualm with the government, is I know the resources are there and there's some great people trying to direct them. It's like having some legislation that makes it like, if we give them money for those things that we enjoy and doing all these things, that it goes back into that space. Like, they're trying to make us pay to camp in national parks and to have these more things to tax on. If they're going to do that, put that money back into where we actually utilise it, you know?
Peter?
Yeah, I'm an optimist as well, and you wonder why, don't you? And the politicians I do get to talk to, which are not a lot, if you can get 10 minutes of their time and you can tell them your story, they like to repeat your story. They like to look good, right? And that's why I say, you let me make you look good, you tell my story. But you need to know what it is first. So I'll tell them the story, and they go, oh, I didn't know that. It's amazing what people don't know, right? And then tell it, and it spreads the word. So more of that, I think, is a useful thing. So does that make me an optimist or silly? I don't know.
I think that makes you an optimist, yeah.
Pragmatic optimist. Could you please thank our fantastic panel?
Wow, what a fantastic panel tonight. I hope you've enjoyed it. My name's Helen Bartlett. I'm the Vice-Chancellor and President of UniSC, and thank you all so much for coming tonight. And I'd really like to express my sincere thanks to Dr. Norman Swan for emceeing this tonight. Always a great pleasure to have you involved in these sorts of events. And our fantastic panel, Josh, Kathy, and Peter. And I hope you found the discussion tonight really stimulating. It's been about bridging that gap, hasn't it, between discovery and the real-world application, and the importance of working collaboratively in our communities. You've heard about the importance of volunteers. You've heard about the importance of what each of us can do individually to make a difference. And, if we work collaboratively, we can really find solutions to some of the world's most pressing ecological and health challenges. So tonight we've been asking, how to better understand the challenges that are facing our natural environment and how we can act on that understanding urgently and in a very practical sense, and how we can all play a part. So both the koala vaccine and the Milby Centre, they began as ideas, and ideas that can become reality. It's never quick. These are long journeys, and I know the journeys that both Peter and Kathy have been on, and Josh in a different way. But these journeys are never-ending, and they're a passion of very dedicated people that that are making a true difference. And behind all of this as well is the power of philanthropy. So this community is a wonderful community because we have so many examples of how people in this community work in partnership with us to help support a lot of the programs of research that we're doing. And this year is a very special year for us. It's our 30th anniversary. This is the original campus of this university that was created by this community. It wouldn't be here without the community. And as part of this celebration this year, we've launched a simple giving appeal. So we've invited our community to help us mark this milestone with a simple gesture, a gift of $30 for 30 years. And so we've started an appeal, and gifts through the appeal will be matched dollar for dollar by a very generous donor, meaning that every dollar goes twice as far, and Kathy's turtle research will benefit directly from this. And as you've heard from Peter tonight, funding is critical for the future rollout of the koala chlamydia vaccine and to perfect that program of research, which will be ongoing for many years. And we would really welcome your support with these sorts of projects. So continued support from community members is really vital. It enables our researchers to continue on this path and protect even more iconic Australian species. So thank you once again to Dr. Norman Swan, to Professor Timms, Professor Townsend, and Josh Neille.